Dotson, Adrian Dotson Yunishye, Betatni Nishle, the Bethlehem Bashachin, Hashgajo Hedashache, Bilagana Dashanale. And I'm Navajo, Dene, as we.
You're listening to RezToCEO. Your host, Trent Billette. Don't forget to subscribe and listen. Hello, welcome back to RezToCEO's podcast. I'm Trent Billette. I'm from Buffalo River Dene Nation, Treaty 10 territory, and I'm with Adrian Dotson. He's from Arizona territory, raised among tribal teachings and faith that taught me resilience.
Start over.
I gotta start over. Just kidding. Now we're not gonna start over, bro. We're raw, and this is how it's gonna be. All right. Talk about you now, Adrian. Go. Just kidding. All right. No. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to RezToCEO. This is me, Trent Billette, your host, and I'm here with Adrian Dotson. Hello, Adrian.
Hey, what's up, Trent? Thank you for having me. I'm excited. Congratulations on your podcast. It's gonna be epic, man. You're gonna make a lot of progress. You're gonna influence a lot of people, and it's gonna be a lot of good gonna come out of this. So, congratulations, and I'm looking forward to what happens.
Well, I thank you for that, and also I want to let the listeners know that where are you coming in from? Because right now we're not meeting in person right now, but in the future, hopefully with the show progression, as you said, we'll be able to do in person and all these other great things. But down the line, where are you calling in from right now?
Yeah, so like Trent said, my name is Adrian Dotson. Adrian Dotson Yunishye, Betatni Nishle, the Bethlehem Bashachin, Hashgajo Hedashache, Bilagana Dashanale. And I'm Navajo, Dene, as we say. You guys are Dene as well, so we're related in that way. Our people, but yeah, I'm from Arizona in the States, and I'm actually in Flagstaff, Arizona right now, and grew up here my whole life. Have deep roots. My family's from the Navajo Nation, and what I just introduced myself in the Navajo way. We always introduce our clans. You know, it just identifies like who our mother is and who our family is, our father's family is. So it's just like keeping that kinship so that people know, oh yeah, I'm Betatni too, or I'm Tibet too. So, once you meet somebody that has the same clans as you, then you know that you're related in some way, and you can start talking to each other or interacting with each other in more of a friendly and family type of way. So we're just talking about how on our reservation, a lot of people still speak Navajo. So I don't speak it fluently, but I've taken classes on it. It's really hard to do if you don't have somebody to speak it with, but really glad to be here, and looking forward to getting into the conversations, Trent.
Well, thank you for your introduction. And also, I wanted to say thank you for saying that again, also in your language. A lot of people, like you said, don't have the ability to talk within their own tongue. But as we know, some people say that if you did know how to understand fluently or just understand, it would be funny to speak. I guess you could say more funnier to say jokes in your own language than to say it in like English. That's what I was always told, because I guess it's more simpler in our language, depending on like whatever language you talk. But I mean, that's what I was always told. Like, it would be cool because you always see a lot of laughter, right, in a lot of Indigenous culture. And I wonder and how these jokes go when it's like speaking fluently with your own tongue, right, without the, I guess you say, English dictionary.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like you see our elders kind of laughing a lot with each other, and they're speaking their language, but then when it gets translated, sometimes it's not as funny. But I don't know, so that's kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, and that's why when we talk about even just for our faith in general, for how it anchors both of you and me, and in general in tech and the world. So I don't know, and how, like, I guess you could say for you, for how would you answer that? Like, if how does faith anchors you in your everyday life?
my faith. How does it anchor me? Um, yeah, man, faith is everything. I went through a lot of troubled times, I guess I would say, or just like when I was younger, um, you kind of think that you know everything. You put your faith in other people, your friends, or you go to college and then you put your faith in your professors, and then you go to work and you put your faith in your boss or whatever, whoever it is, like influencers online. Um, but then, for me, it's like I I grew up my family was Christian, and my grandpa, he was a pastor. And my mom, she was I could tell she was kind of rebellious against it. Um, and because she didn't like take us to church or anything, and really allowed the world to influence me as far as like going along with what the mainstream would say about how we should live our life. It's okay to, have sex out of wedlock, to, that's kind of one of the main things, but like, lusting after people, being in relationships. And I think relationships is really one of the big things, but, even like having anger and hatred, like the world today teaches us that it's okay, you're right, you have righteous anger. But anyways, having faith to me means, letting go of all that stuff and trusting in what God has planned for you, even though you might not know what it is. um, you always got to resist doing the things that you know is wrong, and just having faith that by doing that, god's gonna provide for you. So
So for being down where you guys are economically, like in Navajo Nation, for the faith wise, and for how far would you say it reaches? Like, I know it reaches across the whole world, but I mean, for indigenous cultures, how far or how long did you think it took for it to reach like all of like Native Americans?
how long did it take to reach Native Americans? I don't know, man. That's kind of an interesting question, because for since the beginning, since the Europeans came here, they were trying to convert people to their religion. And a lot of bad things had happened in the name of that, in the name of God. And
That,
so I think that's pretty sad that people would use the name of God to do atrocities, basically.
that's
And
why I always ask people in general, like for me, for our Native American culture, when we bring in faith, they always bring in questioning of the abuse and
yeah,
everything. And when we talk about working, talking about working for a better future, 7 generations for our future, first, not only just us, but for our kids and 7 generations. But when we speak of this, they don't talk about like and how we can all work forward together. But now you can start hearing it more like, why are these more like successful like nations thriving despite these other ones? It's because with relationships amongst businesses, corporations, and not only that, but with, like you said, there's a purpose and a lot of why do we wake up every day. So we all believe, and I believe that a lot of Native Americans believe in like the faith of the creator, and not only just the creator, but God. There's a lot of many names for God, the creator. And then when faith came in, as you said, like Christian faith and all of these faith that a lot of people now follow through a book. That's why I was asked, like, would it be cool and interesting to see where like like the Native American side is. But like as we know, 99% of Native Americans within Native North America were like basically wiped out of like because of our culture. There's like that's what I was told. Like there's like 1% of us that were like still left, and that's like the ones of us still like today, because there's like might be millions of us, but like before pre-colonization already were millions of us. And I believe it because when I do my research, like for me, for my instance, like I look into all of these other faiths, right? There's like 55 different 55 other different religions around the world. And I don't know, it's still probably growing, obviously, but now I'm just saying is that the two number ones on the top are Christians, like the Christian faith for followers of Jesus Christ. And that just increased it because, you know, as 2,500 years ago, we go far as back 2,500 years ago, and you look into your history. I'm just looking into the history that, you know, you can go into a library and be like, okay, well, I can look at all my history of like the Western colonization, but where is the history for Native Americans, as we say, right? And then like we already believed, like we already had a lot of like, you can say, like a way to be more connected to the creator. And that's why we had like sweats, why we have like ceremonies, why we have, you know, like people think they're like offerings, but it's not offerings, right? Like it's not sacrificial. There's nothing like that. Like, you know, people, and then when westernized people actually start indulging in the culture, they start seeing it more like as like, you know, this is amazing. And that's why like when you look at the religions at the top two, right, we look at Christians, and then there's number two, there's I think I would want to say it is it there's it's what is it? Yeah, it's Arabic, isn't it? The second religion?
Muslims.
Is it Muslims, or is it, I don't want to say is it Muslims, but I don't know, but
Islam.
it's something like that in terms of honoring Muhammad. And then in terms of that too, like when you speak to a Muslim, you want to say like in terms of respecting each other, we always respect, you know, between First Nations and tribal nations. That's why with, you know, coming from where you are right now, like for the religion perspective, like here in Canada, we're very like, you guess you can say religious. Like we do believe in, like for where I'm from, like you drive up here, there's a bunch of crosses everywhere. And I'm just saying is like, I just think it's a battle between light and dark. And when we speak of our ancestral roots, they understood that, right? Like light and dark, and what they knew is understand good and bad. That's why they knew of what was like the medicine of like, you know, laughter, you know, being around good energy. They talked about your spirituality. They talked about a lot of, and even the stars, like, you know, like sky watchers, like, you know, they understood more than what we thought. And that's why like when we speak about history, where I'll be like, well, I would like to know, right? Like, where did it all begin 2,500 years ago, before it all began? Like, for a lot of followers, for, you know, religious wise, like Christians and everything, for Jesus's, you know, when he came here on earth. And then that's why I've always like, I don't question it. I always just dig deeper, right? Like, I always say, okay, well, there has to be a track, right? And that's why like they call it a rabbit hole. But I don't really think it's a rabbit hole, because a lot of our indigenous people, you know, we're very artistic, and they already kind of go down a rabbit hole when they, you know, create things, and they always get roadblocks by saying like, you can't do these things or do that or that. And that's why I'm like, well, why can't we? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why can't you be like a programmer? Why can't you be, you know, a person that creates technology, right? That incorporates something that revives your culture. And that's why for all of us today, like listening, when you just said that in your language, that was very powerful for me. And I thank you for doing that. And that's why with tribal nations and, you know, being down where you said, I would like to know and how many tribal nations are very successful economically compared to, let's just say here in Saskatchewan, we have 74 nations, and not a lot of them have economic development corporations, just not even like half of them, I would assume. So I mean, down there, how many people are, I would say, like, are very more educated? Because I guess you used to say in 1950 or 1947, something around there was only 127 Native Americans and like university. So I don't know how much we're in like down in the States. So that would be interesting to know as well. So like it'd be cool to have a database of all of that.
Well, here in the States, and I think probably everywhere, but native cultures are like very diverse. And so it's hard just to say, oh yeah, native people are like this and put them in one big, generalization, because like for us, like our neighbors, for the Navajos, our neighbors are the Hopis, and their culture is like way different than ours, and we clash with them a lot over economics and over religious things, and it's pretty interesting. Like for instance, they like incorporate snakes and stuff into their ceremonies and other reptiles, where Navajos, we're like, we want nothing to do with snakes or any reptiles for the most part. And so and then when it comes to economics, we're so diverse in that way too, because like for the Navajo Nation, we're the largest tribal nation in terms of population. And then next is like the Cherokees, but we have close to each of our tribes have close to 500,000 members. And so, and then on the other end of the spectrum, you have tribal nations that have less than 100 people. And so a lot of them, the smaller ones, are, I would say, more prosperous in their economics, because they're a lot. And then there's also the assimilation. Like some tribes are a lot more assimilated, and they've adopted the ways of the colonizers, quote unquote. But the mainstream society, they've adopted that. They've grown up in that. So they've gone to school, they became educated, they're using their status, they know how to use their status as Native American or Indian to create, like you said, those corporations and get contract preferences, and they're just very good at it. And because their tribes are so small, they can afford, and even casinos, like they can build casinos, and because their tribes are so small, that they're able to give out money to their tribal members and take care of them. And depending on the size of your tribe, you can get pretty, you don't even have to work. A lot of these smaller tribes that have casinos and corporations, they get hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. And so it's called per capita payments. And so but for us on the Navajo Nation, we're too big. We can't, we have a few corporations, but we're just too big to really give out money to people. So the point is that it's very diverse, and yeah, there's the opportunities, but you got to still have that business education and that business mindset in order to take advantage. And I think a lot of people would disagree with me about this, but like Native people in the United States, we're very privileged. Like I would even say more privileged than a lot of people, because one, we have a lot of like scholarship opportunities, we get contract preferences, we get free healthcare, free education, in a lot of sense.
Well, not only that, but
Hold
I know for a lot of our Native Americans down here, that's how I was like for my next question, our tribal nations in the US, like there's a lot of people from even down here in Saskatchewan working for Navajo Nation organizations that I know of, like contracts and stuff. So like when you're speaking of that, you're right, like 100% here in Canada and the US. So I mean, so for a lot of us, like how could
what I
we?
was saying was that we have our in addition to that, in addition to those preferences and those opportunities, we also have our culture, and that's something that's very I guess coveted, in that nobody else has that. it's very small people that you can't just be somebody, you can't just be anybody and come into our culture and experience that and experience our ceremonies and experience our our ways of life. And it's very unique and it's very empowering, and I think a lot of people would agree with that. So when people say, oh, we're they talk about privilege, white privilege and all this stuff, but I'm like, well, you're Native American, you have all these opportunities, and you have your culture, and you have your family. Like, that's really what privilege is to me, not just the material things. Hey, I gotta pause real quick. I gotta go take a pause real quick. Sorry.
All right.
Okay. We up there in the field. Yeah. Sorry about that. Hopefully you can edit that.
Yeah, I'll be able to edit that out. So
yeah.
how do you think our stories and systems differ, and what can we learn from each other, from where I'm from, Northern Saskatchewan, and from where you're from? Like, how could we learn off of each other? Maybe for being from, like you said, a tribal nation of 500,000, and if you look at the Dene Nation, even though the numbers might be as big as they say, but here in Northern Saskatchewan, we're not as big as they say, right? Because economically, not a lot of people, as we know, report back to, let's just say, the government, in my perspective. So, I mean, and how could we learn off of each other and your perspective from being where you are from here? So,
yeah, I think that's what we do a lot, especially down here, and we are always learning from each other. Like, we look at other tribes and what they're doing as far as casinos and forming these corporations and leveraging their sovereignty, pushing their limits to their sovereignty on what they can do as far as taxation and creating opportunity zones. And so a lot of times we got to follow the most innovative tribes. Our tribe's kind of slow, I would say. They're very conservative in general when it comes to, like, for instance, when it comes to casinos, we were really late into the game. And because of our values, our cultural values, we, for a while, the position was that we don't want to be involved in that. But as the years went on and we saw the other tribes and how much they were making and how it had benefited them and what they were able to do with those revenue, then we thought, okay, maybe it is maybe this is an opportunity that we need to capture. So yeah, we're always learning from each other, and I think we need to kind of work together a little bit more instead of like competing against each other. So and I think it'd be great for tribes and tribal nations down here in the States to figure out how to work with you guys up there in the north, because there's like all those tariffs happening, and anytime that there's a change like that, it creates opportunities. Like for us, we can, if we're trading between nations, then the governments really can't get involved. and they can't tax it.
Well,
So there's an
that's
opportunity
kind
there.
of that's kind of the same way with the tobacco, right? Like with like, for instance, like the Mohawks, right? Because there's two sides. I know that there's Mohawks in Canada, and then the Mohawks in like the United States side. And then I know like and how I wouldn't say like they're tobacco, but there's two nations on two sides, right? So like I would say they were trading, like you said,
Yeah, trading.
and like a lot of people would say that's illegal, right? But how is that illegal when two nations, like you said, like there was no borders, so like people don't even know that you can cross without your like without even saying like showing them any ID. You can just tell them that you're Native American and you're crossing, and then they'll let you cross. I mean, one time, like just as another story, we were on Rainbow Bridge. We were going just across to visit for a couple hours, and then we told these people that we were bringing from the north, right? My family, I mean, my mom, my late mom, and my yeah, we brought them down there. We were showing them, and then took about 5 hours, and then they eventually let us go through. But it's because we fought for our sovereign. We knew our sovereign rights, as you can say, right? Like when it comes to like, do you think like tribal sovereignty and First Nation self determination look different in the digital age? That's like my next question.
Yeah, it's a good question. What does it look like? Who controls the digital space? That's kind of interesting. And like, it seems like even if we don't control it, we can create our own, because it all it's all kind of in the cloud. And so like, yeah,
But that's
it's gonna be
opportunity.
yeah, it's
That's
an opportunity.
opportunity for
Yeah.
indigenous people like ourselves, like and entrepreneurs, like for a digital space to capitalize, as I was saying earlier. And like the people don't understand that it can make money, but then they want examples of like, well, how is it making you money, right? Like and then like you said, like it's not about just the money though. It's about, how is it sustaining my family? How is it, or is it creating jobs? And if you're working with your family to build a business, I find that very beautiful. And a lot of people tell me like, oh, don't do it because like this values and that values, but it's because we're not shown how it is to be traditional in a way of like what you speak, right? Being strong and being like, with each other. Because when it comes to us against the world, no one even tells and says like, oh, I'm from this reservation, right? Because it's so, like you said, economically, we would say poor, because like we still don't even have paved roads. I'm just saying as that like everywhere else has paved roads. I'm just saying 60 kilometers, and then here I'm just saying is that we still don't have paved roads. And then for me, like, there's other nations that we know of in province that have like success because they're closer to cities, they're economically better with relationships. But I mean, there's also opportunity in the digital age, as we speak of, right, to make money and to like capitalize on. But no one would hear, let's just say if I went to my chief and council, like who will hear me? A lot of it I would assume it goes to deaf ears because no one's educating them, right, at a very young age on reserve. And a lot of these decisions are made on a reservation. They're not made off reservation. No matter where you are, right? Chief and council, they have control of everything that goes on. No matter what it is, your chief has the final say. And that's what people don't understand. And people do understand that. But when you're off reserve, right, they just assume that, oh, like, no, they're not that strong because you don't see them, right? And that's why, like here, we have what you call another Cree Nation. They're called Kasaki Management, and they're pretty big, but they've been in the game for 30 plus years, economically ahead of a lot of people, and even further, like you said, right? Like a lot of different nations advance differently, and you know what I mean. And learning off each other, there's still that stigma of like, oh, like you're Dene or you're Cree or you're Dakota. Like there's always some battle, but it's like right now, like we speak of, like right now, it has to be like we have to come together, like because of what you speak of, like, and who's gonna do it, and if not us, who's gonna speak upon these issues? Because a lot of what we say, a lot of people don't even want to talk about because it creates. They always think it creates conflict, but there's no one there to filter a lot of that, right? Because no one's saying, well, maybe you just gotta like maybe they're wording it wrong because a lot of our indigenous people they don't speak English, right? As we know of, like some might be fortunate enough to speak their own language. So with like the digital age, I would like to see more of like how we can capitalize on that, for the future. especially with like, cryptocurrency and everything, like, not only just crypto, but like opportunities of investments and, talking more about like those types of like money talk, you know what I mean? Like not just physical cash, because that has no value. $100 from like difference from like $100 investment, which has more, right? And investments are your value of your money. I mean, like, and a lot of people spend their money on just useless things, and I'm just like, they don't invest in their own people. In my perspective, like they'll say, "Oh, well, I'd rather buy this than buy this off someone." Like for goods, like for even our own people's art, like they don't even buy it, right? But then other people from other nations will be like, "Well, I'll buy it for this X amount of dollars." But no one has no one out. Let's just say no one knows on how to build a Shopify store, or even the shipping or handling, or like no one's there to help them or filter. You know what I mean? Like with entrepreneurs nowadays digitally, because it's still new to them, because no one's teaching them even how to use a computer. You know what I mean? Like it's still hard for them. A lot of people, it's not their fault, economically, because as we say, like a lot of people are just more traditionally, but at the same time, we are also losing our traditional ways. So how could we capture all of that digitally and, and resonate also, because like a lot of people can be, retaining wealth off the digital, like, the digital, the gold rush, I always call it, because a lot of people want to learn, like we say, English, or I mean, like from English to their own language, but who can teach that? Elders and stuff. And a lot of the elders are willing, right? And then who's going to record it? There's so much opportunity on reservation, because like even for like content creation, like, and that's why like I always ask people, like, what do you think would be the next best thing? You know what I mean? Like you might not be able to be, Mr. Beast or nothing, but you could be in your own space of being like indigenous, right? And on top of that, like I said earlier, is that like for a lot of us, like being for First Nations are sovereign, like we are tribal nations different in a way when it comes to partnering with like non-indigenous people. Like how is it down there for like the stigmatism of like being indigenous?
The stigmatism, uh, or the stigma. Um, I don't know. I don't really see it, because it's like everybody is trying to, like, people don't even know you're indigenous unless you say it, or unless you're wearing your traditional attire. But like if you're just talking to somebody and you want to talk your about your business, and if you're pitching your services or your product to somebody, then and for the most part that's not really going to come into play, unless you're selling some jewelry, some traditional style jewelry or something. Then yeah, you're gonna say, yeah, I'm indigenous, I'm from this area, I learned how to do this from my dad or my mom, and this is a tradition that we're trying to carry on. Then yeah, that backstory. But like if that backstory would matter, but if you're just doing this a regular service, then you just want to make sure that your values align, and you guys are you guys want the same thing. You guys want to both win. You want to have a win-win situation. So I think that's kind of one of the challenges for Native people. A lot of times it's like we assume that people are judging us, and they're like, well, this person didn't want to do business with me because I'm Native. When really I think it's like, well, no, you just didn't sell it. Like nobody, if you can help someone, you can solve their problem. They don't care if you're Native, they don't care if you're black or white or Hispanic. If you can help, some people might, and if they're like that, then you don't want to do business with them anyway, and they're not going to last very long, because we've
Well, that's why
transcended.
that's why I think sovereignty comes into play when people like, and just they say you have a council, you have people to go to. And that's why like a lot of people go and join these groups, and a lot of them you know their expectations are not there, especially when it comes to like when you join courses and stuff. And that's why I always advocate for pushing for Native Americans. That's just for yourself and I. If we were to like throw on courses or something, like if they talk about sovereign, like let's just say Truth and Reconciliation just happened recently here. And then when we speak about it, there's so many corporations, so many, businesses as we speak of, like, and then when you go to them, and then let's just say like, oh, you didn't sell them on this, and this. And like you said, they're not being prepared, right? No one's giving them, because the majority of the time when you sell stuff, like you know what you're selling, you know what the purpose is. And then you're like, well, okay, well, I'm going to execute this because my goal is at the end of the day is to sell this many products or whatever. And if people had that mindset of like, okay, well, I have all of this products, right? Like all of this material, like as you speak, jewelry and whatever. And then you're like, well, okay, well, how can I position myself, right? Positioning yourself is always opportunity. That's why I always say, and listening to people that are very younger than me and then older than me, than people that have been very successful, like I said, in the digital world, like, and it's just like 16-year-old kids, you know what I mean? They're able to figure out algorithms, all this stuff. And I mean, like, we are able to do that too, like Native Americans, like, but like you said earlier, no one's teaching or no one's showing. And that's why with like courses that people get out there, right, they're taught these things. So like when it comes to your tribal nations, like, do your guys do they outsource a lot of the courses, or do you guys do it within your own tribe and try to get within like your own businesses to teach about business? Or how does that go for a lot of it? Because here we get people to come in our reservation, and a lot of the times they're like, you know what I mean, like they don't do any kind of impact after they leave because they're not from here originally. So like, you know what I mean? Then they will rather pay them, X amount of dollars that could have been maybe, could have been a couple, seed money kind of thing for your business to like, pop off or better, positioning yourself. But, you might not have economic support in that way. It's just say for community. So how does it work in your own tribal nation for like these types of situations?
I think that's interesting question, because like I used to think, and I still kind of think, that there's these organizations, they're nonprofit organizations, and there's money out there as far as grants to provide entrepreneurship training to Native Americans. But I think for the most part, it's like, who do we know that's Native American that is worth $100 million, that's worth $1 billion, that's worth $100 billion? And there's nobody, really. I mean, there might be a couple millionaire Native Americans, but we don't know who they are. And it's kind of on us. It's like, well, who are they? Where are they? Why aren't they showing us themselves? And why aren't they teaching the next generation? So it's not really on the council and the chief to do that, because they're just politicians. They get paid a salary, and they don't really understand that kind of mindset. So we can't expect politicians to understand the entrepreneurial mindset. And we just have to find those mentors. And I think with the internet, we're very fortunate to, like you said, we can purchase courses, we can go on YouTube and find these people that have done have walked the road that you want to walk. Maybe they're not Indigenous, but that's kind of your differentiator, and your opportunity is, how can you do what this person did, but do it in your own way as a Native Indigenous person, and put your own spin and flavor on it, and it becomes unique. So I think that creates opportunities, because I follow a lot of people on YouTube and social media, and I go to the conferences.
Yeah, didn't you just attend a conference? Like, would you want to tell our listeners about how that went and everything?
Yeah, I just attended a conference in Orlando. I don't know if anybody knows Patrick Bet-David. He runs a channel called Valuetainment. And in Orlando, they had a conference, and there was about 8,000 people there, all with the entrepreneurial mindset, and there to learn, and there to network and connect with other like-minded people that are very motivated and want to learn about business, and learn directly from Patrick Bet-David, who built his insurance company and I think he sold part of it for $200 million. And like him, he took his money, and now he's investing into his Valuetainment channel on YouTube and the podcast. And he just gives out value all the time. Like, content. And same with our Alex Hormozy. Like he writes books and he's putting out content every day, putting out like 5 videos. And it's like, where are the native people that are doing that? So I see, you trying to do that, and I try to do that, but it's like we don't have the resources. Like first, you kind of have to make it first, because then it's like you have the credibility to really talk about what you're trying to teach. But then at the same time, everybody's at different levels. So even though I'm not at Patrick Bet-David's level, I can still teach people that are trying to get to my level. So
how many people were at that conference that you would say
8,000
that were
8,000
Native American?
There was probably none except for me.
And those are the type of spaces, as I said earlier, is like when it comes to these investments, you paid for these, like, right? It came out of your own pocket.
Yeah, it was $1,500 for the ticket, plus the flight, plus the room, plus the meals.
And with on top of that, like it would be easier, like I said earlier, especially with the organization, like for each other's digital spaces, let's just say, for instance, like courses and all of these other spaces, and just by supporting each other, right? Like you said, like there's no one like in these spaces because there's no one like there's even just basically like following you in general, like, or just like liking or sharing, and sharing in general of like, okay, well, this guy has a lot of value, and like you said, like you might not be like Alex, but you have a lot of value, right? Because you invested and you have that opportunity to network. Let's just say for someone in Canada, right? I might not be able to go to Florida, right? And there's not a lot of events. Let's just say,
but you can go to Florida. What are you talking about?
No, but I'm just saying is that like I can't just drive there. But I'm just saying there's opportunities.
I can't drive there. I have to fly there.
To create that border, like for me to fly there, I would need a passport, right? And for me to drive there, I could just go there with my status card, and I don't have a passport right now. So in general, that's why I can't do that. But I'm just saying is that like you can't just drive 6 hours. You can't just like fly how far. I'm just saying there's opportunity all in everywhere. Like, you can create conferences. There's people like, even digital conferences, right? Like you can start with like, and supporting in that way by just showing up. And I understand a lot of people just show up too, but when you showed up at these events, right? Like what did you get at the end of it, right? And you probably got a lot of value that you can teach a lot of individuals that are listening, as you can say, because you're investing in yourself every day as an entrepreneur. But as an Indigenous entrepreneur, you're also balancing life and everything like that with culture. So like, for that being said, like in your way of like your view, what does cross-border unity between our nations actually look like spiritually and economically?
Well, like I kind of mentioned it earlier, it's just like we have to figure out ways to work together. I went to another conference. There's a conference every year in Las Vegas called the Reservation Economic Summit. And that was kind of a big topic, was how do we work with tribes in Canada. And there were some panels with some of the tribal leaders from some of the Canadian First Nations. And then also the leaders from some of the nations down here, and they were working together. I can't remember what exactly they were working on. I think they were working on something that had to do with the tariffs. But having those meetings, having those conversations, we need to really figure out how we can work together and push our sovereignty, push the limits of it. We like to say we're sovereign, and we do have some sovereign status and abilities, but at the same time, we can't just do anything we want to do, because we don't own the land. We don't we can't borrow money like the United States does and go into debt and just keep borrowing money. We're dependent on the amount of money that they give us, and then also we're limited by the money that we can generate. So there's opportunities, but we just have to work together. And then also, as far as the spirituality, like we just have to support each other and not, bring each other down, as far as like, because like I was saying, everybody's diverse. We have different cultures and different beliefs, and some people are Christian, some people are traditional, some people are NAC, Native American Church. They smoke peyote, and I'm scared. I don't think they smoke it; they drink it. But um,
So what kind of journey were you on over there? I don't
I
know.
know, right?
I want to go back there for you if I were you.
But there's a lot of like, there's a lot of like like traditional people on the Navajo Nation. They're like, they don't like Christians, and they don't even like the Native American church, because like that's not our way. That's not our traditional way. And um, so we just have to kind of support each other and be tolerant of other people's beliefs. And
So for instance, like for like tribal nations, do you think tribal nations are ahead when it comes to tech sovereignty? Like for instance, for your business or for what you're trying to do in the digital space, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit more about you and like your business and everything like that as well?
sure. Well, back in 2018, I started a marketing business called Rainmaker Media Group, and it was kind of tough because I kind of thought I knew what I was doing and I knew about marketing, but I didn't. I mean, I knew a little bit, but I had a couple of wins because my family owns a business as well, an environmental consulting business, and I worked in there for a while and had some success. And I worked for a public relations company. So before that, and I also knew about writing and knew about a little bit of business development. But when it came to marketing and like how to actually get results, it was a growing pain that I had to really invest in myself and um, learn from other people about how to actually get results for my clients. And so that was a big thing. That was a big growing pain. But now with AI, I think it kind of makes it it makes it easier, but at the same time, it's a little more challenging for people you can't just use AI and become like an expert in marketing, because AI is just going to regurgitate whatever's out there in the public information that's out there. So you still have to kind of become a subject matter expert or a domain expert. But so in my marketing company, I started using AI when it came out, when it first started getting popular in 2022. And now I'm starting a new business called Sovereign Strategies AI. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about as far as because of AI, because of the internet, and because of social media, we don't have to rely on these things like of the past, where it costs a lot of money to build a website, it costs a lot of money to advertise, it costs a lot of money to reach your customers. Now we don't need to hire a bunch of people to run our businesses. We can, automate things. AI can help us. We have social media. We can talk directly to our audiences. So I'm going to be launching some courses and some trainings about how to use AI for that kind of thing, because you can use AI, and I know a lot of people are using AI, but at the same time, you have to have that domain expertise about business, or else you're not going to know if what the AI is giving you is good or not. So I have like a bunch of frameworks that I use as far as understanding your customer, understanding your market, building your offer. How do you create an offer that's irresistible to your customers? How do you generate leads for your business? And then how do you maximize the value of every customer? So those are things that a lot of people don't really think about. They think about, well, I'm just trying to get a client or trying to get a customer. But business is about keep getting a customer and keeping that customer, and continuously providing value so that they stick with you, that you get that they call it lifetime value.
So for like being said for that, like everything going on in your world and everybody else's world, is there really a safe space for Indigenous people to speak upon the issues that we speak up? Like, I find that, for instance, like, when you join, a lot of people join like in other things, let's just say for subscriptions, they, pay for Netflix, they pay for all of this stuff. But then when it comes to supporting, a digital business type of support, I feel like it's always like, you have to be at this stage before they can trust you, right? And that's why, like you said, like, how do you build this type of trust before they buy and execute, your product and put it into their hands, and, and how do they going to get value and retain it, like being a recurring customer. And like you said, like a lot of people don't look at it as a way of like when it in tribal nations, like you said, politics, right? And that's why, like, I think now we gotta start thinking maybe people in tribal nations as general, maybe politics isn't always the way to think, right? Because if everybody's thinking like that, that's obviously not the way that our ancestors probably thought. Because before colonization, as I always say, how do you think they always were thinking or moving forward? And they always thought about things that probably were never going to be possible, but then here we are. So, and that's why I always let people know, like, anything's possible, especially with this new era of like digital artificial intelligence. And it's still like a gold mine, especially for a lot of indigenous people that are interested in getting it, but they don't have, like you said, like a collective place to come together and and be open about all of this, or like where are these resources being available, and like who's filtering all of them. So like I said, like if you like research and do Google search, right, and be like, hey, AI course, Indigenous, or even, and however you word things is important too, right? So this is why, like, artificial intelligence can only teach you so much, but this is why you pay for expertise, you pay for skills, you pay for people why they reinvested themselves. And for that being said, like, for instance, like, that's why for sovereignty or just economically or everything like that, the way that the government or everything, they speak, but they don't give opportunity for people like ourselves, right? The smaller indigenous businesses, even if we've been in this space for many, many years, don't matter, because if you're not like, you're retaining those customers, retaining those, possibilities, even the ones that said no to you, those are even like data collection, like, is important. And a lot of companies don't even know about that. Like, if they're an indigenous company, is all of their data being retained for, like, um, who's keeping it really, right? And it's usually third party, and a lot of people don't even really know about that, or even how to secure their websites and like build things upon that, like you said, frameworks, right, to success. And so for a lot of indigenous entrepreneurs, for us out there, like, we want to create, like, I guess you could say, is there like, what would you, an indigenous Silicon Valley, look like between us from Arizona to Saskatchewan?
Well, like you're saying, we could, like, that creates there's an opportunity to create that space in a digital way. And I know you talked a little bit about things that are happening in our tribal communities, as far as supporting entrepreneurs. And I was saying that you can't really depend on the politicians, but there are organizations, and like for us down here, there's like organizations called Change Labs, and they're doing a lot of great work as far as raising money, like getting grants and then lending out the money, as far as because Native people, it's always been a challenge to get capital, get money, to borrow money, because we don't have land, we don't have assets. So they do what's called a kinship loan, and so meaning that we're just going to lend you money based on the fact that you're Native, and the fact that you have a business plan, and they help you with your get your finances in order, as far as your accounting, develop your business plan, and just come up with a plan for repaying there's some other things. And then also they help you like with some marketing and some branding, and like I did some workshops for them recently where I was talking about how to use AI for marketing and how to grow your business with it using AI tools. So there is things like that are emerging. And I think and then there's also some venture capital groups, some people that are starting these investing, like I said, in venture capital groups where they invest in Native owned businesses. So we just have to figure out what that ecosystem, they call it startup ecosystems or entrepreneurial ecosystems. And because we're so spread out, people that are starting, non-natives that are starting tech companies, they move to Silicon Valley because the ecosystem is there. Everybody's there. Everybody's in that mindset where we're growing, we're funding, we're innovating, and they want to be in that type of environment. And so we need to create that kind of environment, but it's hard because we're so spread out. But if we can create that kind of environment like online, and I think that's kind of what you're trying to do. That's definitely what we need to do. But then there's like all these different, it's fractionalized, all these different organizations that are doing it, but we need to figure out how can we bring them together so that we can work together. And also natives need to work together. Indigenous people need to work together instead of everybody always wants to do their own thing, but we have to figure out ways to work together.
Well, that's why like I always ask people to be here on the podcast. And like for instance, I had one individual, they asked if I was going to pay them to be on my podcast. And like you said, right, like as being Indigenous, right, like you would see maybe this is a good opportunity not only to be a part of something, but like I said, a lot of people want to listen, especially to resilience and stories and the backstory of a lot of what's going on, especially under what's under the hood. And I don't know, I just kind of find it like, you know what I mean? Because especially for, like you said, working with each other, right? Like there's not a lot of things like, for instance, like if Joe Rogan was like, oh, you want to speak on my podcast? And like, you know what I mean? Like no one's going to be like, oh yeah, you're going to pay me? And like, obviously maybe someone would, but I'm just saying is that like, they would see it as an opportunity because how many like millions of listeners listen to Joe Rogan, right? Like, and then it's like Joe Rogan didn't start off like that though, right? If you go do your research, right, it all started from somewhere in his own little community, right? Like you said, he moved. A lot of these creators moved too, right? Like like digital creators as well, like not just the Silicon Valley and the tech, but like just like creators for content, like you know what I mean? For that's a big space as well, even just music and everything. So it would be great to capitalize, like you said, because tech is inclusive in all of that. Because right now, one of the biggest industries is tech, right? It's like the biggest industries is tech. And we know that if we don't incorporate tech in our businesses, as you say, there's courses out there that are like already, generating revenue for someone. But like if an Indigenous person is taking that course and they don't feel connected to that, they just feel like it's another waste of their money because they weren't filtered to the right places, right? Like there's no one filtering in these people to go to the right places to get the right support as they need it and build back in that ecosystem. Like, and for here, like Canada, our ecosystem, we support roughly around $30 billion just as an Indigenous group. We like reinvest almost every year, like in the Canadian ecosystem, as an Indigenous group, we give 30 billion. So if I'm saying is that we generate 30 billion for other Westernized businesses, how much can we reinvest that into our own people, right? Every year, right? Like, and that's where I want to see like wealth everywhere digitally, right? Because it could be shared for everybody. Like if you bought Bitcoin and like obviously before it boomed, like in 2010, 2011, whatever time before it even became bigger than 500, like, if I shared some with you, share some with me, and because we saw the vision, right? And then like 10 to 15 years, now we're all thriving. And that's how it is with content creators, right? It took them many years, but with TikTok and everything, we're growing as fast as an Indigenous group. But who's capitalizing or who's showing these people too, right? Like, and that's why I always see so much of this potential. But like having conferences, having these events, having, what could bridge Saskatchewan from here to there, right? Like, so a lot of us, we always create barriers in our minds saying like, oh, we'll do it tomorrow. And like for me, myself, like I'm getting a lot more, as you can say, trying to get better with time management, but like with everything going on, as you say, like there's life, economics, and other barriers that you might have to overcome. But that's why your story can also be empowering for when it comes to even selling your product, right? Because a lot of that times too is like in how you tell your story. And that's why listening to a lot of elders and listening to your own people, your circle and everything, you get better at wording a lot of things, right? And that's why like you have to be around these people. And not only if you can't be around them physically, but digitally. That's why even joining like groups online and stuff like, support groups. A lot of people don't even do that too, right? They don't balance their life and, they don't say, I'm going to be on a podcast today. And then they'll say, well, there's a lot of time. Like, oh, I have to go. Like, oh, thank you. Like, it's like to me, it's like a lot of indigenous people can see, like, okay, well, maybe it's not truthfully coming from the heart. So that's why I always try to help people to be truthful and to tell their story. And like, I thank you for always being open and, about being who you are and being true. And for everybody that's been on my show, it's always an honor to always hear and always to see, I guess you could say, from your lens, as you can say, for the struggles and everything as you spoke upon. So for like, what are you seeing in the creator space down south? Are tribal creators monetizing their stories?
I'm not sure. I think, like I told you before, I was on a podcast before, and right now I'm not even on social media, really. I'm like on LinkedIn, and that's it. I deleted all my social media, and because it was very distracting to me. And like I have two daughters. I have a 5-month-old and another one that's about to be 4 next month, 4 years old. And I found myself just like consuming a lot of content, and not necessarily native content, but like I never really was on TikTok, so, but I know that there's a lot of native creators, especially on TikTok, and I'm not really sure if they're monetizing and how that's going, but I know that there are some native entrepreneurs. I'll shout out Jeremy Ariso for once. Check him out. He got a deal with Indian motorcycles, and he did some designs for them, and they did a whole campaign because Indian motorcycles, has nothing to do with Indians. They just took our imagery. They put a chief head on their motorcycle and called it Indian, and it's been a very popular brand for I don't know how many years, 100 years maybe. And now they're barely coming around and be like, all right, well, we got to, support natives, support real Indians. And he got that opportunity. He's a designer down in Phoenix. So shout out to him for that. And I think there's just other opportunities that are starting to emerge like that because people want authenticity. And so, there's all these companies that use native imagery. Ralph Lauren, they brought a Navajo girl in to help them with some designs because they like those designs. They like native designs, and but at the same time they want to do it ethically and authentically. So you got to bring in a native person. So there's those kind of opportunities that are opening up. I'm not sure about like monetizing content. I think if you should use there's definitely an opportunity to build your personal brand through content and let people know like what are your values, what is it that you do, what is your expertise, and then monetizing it in a way like selling products or selling your courses or selling services. So I heard Gary Vee recently said your brand or your personal brand is the best funnel you could have because you're educating people, you're bringing them closer to that next step with you. So we can't get upset if we're not building our personal brand. Like we start a business and we go to a company and say, hey, I have this service or I have this product, and they don't buy from you because they don't know you, and you can't blame them because when I started my business, like that happened to me a lot. Like nobody wanted, they were interested in my services, but at the same time, I hadn't built the credibility yet. And now, like 7 years later, 5 years later, now I'm finally working with some of the people that I talked to like 5 years ago because they've seen me, on social media, on LinkedIn. They see me at conferences. They, and I'm still doing the same thing. I'm not switching. I'm not saying, okay, this year I'm doing something else. Now I'm selling this, or now I'm providing this service. Then you got to build up that credibility again every time you switch your thing. So you have to just pick something and keep doing it, and it's going to take a while, but the more you do it, the faster you can become credible. Like say if you're in sales, and if you're new to sales and you're only like doing like 5 sales calls a week once every day, then it's going to take you a long time compared to somebody that's doing 20 calls a day, and they're getting 100 calls every week. So
Well,
it's just repetitions. How
when I
many
worked at
repetitions
when
is
I
going to help you get better faster, and you're
when
going
I
to
work
get credibility. Go ahead.
when I worked in sales, I guess you could say, Adrian, I used to do a lot of cold calls, but as you
Yeah.
can say, like, how many are you doing a day? And that's why, like, for me, when I worked at sales, this was before my accident and everything, and before all the events, I guess you could say, tragically upon me. But all of those struggles of why I'm here today, through the fire, I am now what they call a diamond. I'm just kidding, but like, for instance, like, I did a lot of like calling, and then even for people like rejection, but it's even for people that you might not even know. Like, I woke up at, like, I guess you could say, real early, like 6 a.m. and then I would be in the office at like 7:30, and then from there it'd be just be calling people, right? But there'd be a certain time, like 9 o'clock, like there's like also like you need to know like what times to call people, when
Yeah.
not to call people, because like you're not going to be calling people at like 6:30, right, or 7:30, real early in the morning, but maybe 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock is the sweet spot. And like they even have scripts, right? Like when you like I used to sell cars. And then, even that right now, like sales, like is a big industry booming. Like a lot of people want to, be in sales, but like you said, like who's teaching a lot of this? So like, for that being said, like for all of your faith and everything that you believe in, how do you influence that, influence the way that you approach AI or coding? Like, how does that, like, does it influence you in any way? Like your belief systems or anything now with this new technology that we call artificial intelligence, or just even coding in general?
I think so. In that, I think it's a very great tool for helping you articulate some of the things that you're thinking and that you're feeling, and even coming up with new language, new jargon, new like you could coin new terms with the help of AI, because you have like this feeling, you feel like something's off or something's wrong, and but you don't know you don't know the words for it. So you just talk to the AI about it, and tell it how you're feeling, and get some feedback, and keep going back and forth. So I think that's really helpful, and I like I tell AI a lot of stuff about, like, how I'm feeling, and how I feel like it relates to my my faith. Um, and so I don't know. I don't like. I'm not an expert on my indigenous culture, because I wasn't raised that way, and also I kind of embraced my Christian faith over that. But so I don't know how other people are using it as far as indigenous, but for my faith, on the faith side, I always try to incorporate like faith into everything I do, um, because it's just, I don't know, it's just more powerful. It just gives you it gives you that confidence, and that and the ability to just do things you might not be comfortable with, or you might be nervous about, but like I said in the beginning, that faith is going to get you over that hump, because it's God's plan and not your plan. So you gotta do it, even though you might be scared, you might be nervous, you might be shaking in your boots, but that's why faith is faith.
And then for a lot of listeners out there, as you said, there might be a little conflict for a lot of people for saying, as you can say, between traditional and just like for Western faith, because a lot of, like you said, there's still that people trying to balance, right, and trying to figure out where they are, who they are. And for a lot of, I always tell people, like, it's always good to believe in anything. In just general, a lot of people don't believe in nothing. And especially if you believe in your own faith, I should say traditionally, and you believe in the creator and you believe all of these teachings, there's always something to be learned from each other, right? And like you said, a lot of urban reserve members, as for, like I said, people live off reserve, they are already indulged in like westernized living, and they understand economics. So there's a lot that we can teach for a lot of people that want to understand and how to succeed, on and off reserve digitally, and that's why I like creating an organization like mine, RezToCEO, and listening to your story about how everything was created through your lens, especially for being economically located where you are. especially for the United States. I know there's like, last time I looked, there was like 500 million people, I think, right, just for the United States. I don't know if it's bigger or not, but in Canada, we're less than that. Like my province is like, I don't know, like we don't even have that much. I would say maybe a couple mil, maybe a million. I don't know, but we
Yeah.
don't even, and like, so empowerment through a lot of these resources, as we say, like supporting through, on the podcast, or, just all through the channel, or even just following you on LinkedIn, reaching out to you for some of your services and for everything that we speak upon on the podcast as today. Like, I just want to wrap up a few things here before we go. I just want to say thank you for coming onto the show and, sharing everything that you have, especially for your view and your lens, especially for coming and growing up on where you come from. I always hear about the Navajo Nation, and we always hear, you see it all over, even on the cinemas, like, you see it all over for in general for like cowboys and Indians, but we want to tell more of this perspective of like, we're not what they say that we are, right? Because we're our own stories, and it's like us that creates them, and for us to tell them. And, that's why I created RezToCEO. So I thank you for, enlightening me, especially, and hopefully some of my listeners, that, with what you have to offer and what you're trying to do and moving a space, especially in the tech world, hopefully I can help you by getting more of like people to listen to what's going on, and, follow you as well. Like you said earlier, you're going to be launching a sovereign strategies
Strategies.
AIs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
then, check out Rainmaker Media Group. That's my marketing business. But yeah, sovereignstrategies.ai as well. And then check me out on LinkedIn. Like I said, I'm not really on other social platforms, but I might jump on TikTok soon, because I think I want to help younger people, because like I see, like, I've been doing a lot of training as far as AI and business. And what I see a lot is older people, which it makes sense, because there's like people that are in their 50s and 60s, and they're like, shit, I need to learn AI so that I can, stay ahead of the game. And that's great. But I think there's also like people who are younger, who they know how to use AI, but they don't have that expertise in the business or marketing or something like, those types of areas. So like I was saying, you can use AI, but you still have to have expertise in order to know whether what AI is giving you is quality content or not. And so I want to help people. I want to help younger generations. And so I'm thinking I need to get on TikTok and let them know, and then just try to hope, influence them, hopefully, because I think there's a lot of negative influence. There's a lot of hate. There's a lot of people that are spewing hate, and they're saying, like what we saw with that political guy, Charlie Kirk. He got assassinated, and we saw people on social media, saying, well, he deserved it, and, praising, celebrating that had happened. And, so obviously there's that kind of hatred, even though you don't have to agree with him. I didn't really agree with him, Charlie Kirk. I thought there was a lot of things that I didn't like what he said, but at the same time,
we're all part of the same. We're
yeah.
all part of the same tribe, and that's a two-legged tribe, and that's why they say the human race. So I mean, no justice obviously comes to the ones that bring pain amongst the ones if we don't speak upon it, right? And then you saw the manhunt, like, everybody came together. I find that that's what's powerful, the community, and that's what we just need for Indigenous people, especially for when they come for us, especially for our own faith. A lot of Indigenous people believe in God, believe, in Jesus Christ, believe, and there's also some that don't, right? And we're always going to come upon these battles. But like I always say, for all of our listeners, there's always like you said, you need to be a part of the circle, right? And you're a part of the circle, and you just want to give more of what you're learning to the younger generation. So when they do and like uppercome and like how are they going to monetize? They're going to be, learning more of the skills that, what we're going to be learning about in the future, maybe, more about, like, especially for younger people, because they have more time to learn, right? They have more time to sit down and like, okay, well, even though you're an expert in this, like, I might be better at that. That's why working together, right? Nation to nation, coming together for even businesses. So thank you for, sharing your insight, especially for everything going on, especially around the world. We want to keep it also positive, no matter where we are. So, I just want to ask you if you would be able to say anything, let's just say in your own language, because, that's like wisdom or something that's like wise, like you would say it, like if you wanted to give something to a young person, what would it be before we close it up?
Not in my own language, but I think that, like you're saying, the seven generations, I think we say that a lot, but at the same time, like, well, what exactly are we actually doing? And like I was saying, who's out there putting out information and content? We have to rely on people who are not Indigenous to do that for us. And so I think that's why we really need to kind of, the leaders, the people that are actually successful, need to put themselves out there. And it might be uncomfortable, and you might be nervous, but you got to put yourself out there. And I think with the younger people, they're kind of at a disadvantage because we have AI coming in that can do a lot of remedial tasks, and then also the way that we kind of set up our economy, in that, especially in the United States, like, we're in so much debt as far as a nation, that we've been spending and spending and spending, and the older generations have been the beneficiaries of that. And now the younger generations are like, we're kind of screwed, me and everybody younger than us. So there is a really big need that we need to focus on the youth and the younger generations, and making sure that they have the same opportunities, if not more opportunities than we did, and like stop being so selfish, I guess.
Gatekeeping. I always say it's
Gatekeeping. That's a good one.
gatekeeping. Yeah, they're always gatekeeping and our people from succeeding to what they say. Because, like, for me, right, like, I don't know what generation I fall under, but if we look 7 generations, how many years is that, right? How many years does one person live, right? And then the next, right? That's one generation, isn't that?
350 years, maybe.
Something like that, right? So, like, and then here we are, like, trying to, like, as we speak. So I thank you for being on my podcast, RezToCEO, Voices of Resilience. Really, it's our podcast because it's, voicing your stories and everything that you're going through, your struggles, and hopefully being a part of the circle here on RezToCEO. I hope to bring more listeners, and like I said, to bring more followers, as you can say, because we need more guidance. And I hope to have you back on my show in the future, which I hope will be big, because I'm processing hopefully more content that is valuable. So before we leave, what would you also would like to see more on the show of, for, let's just to say, giving back to 7 generations?
I guess just, I think what you're doing is great, like talking to people, like your first episode, that guy that he had the excavating business, just asking them, what did you do? Like, how did you get your first contract? Like, how did you get your first job? How did you, what was your first sell? Like, what did you say? Or how did you, build that relationship? And, just get real specific about what it was that they did that, brought them success, and what it is, like, that they did that maybe didn't work out for them. And so, just trying to get them to be more open about those kind of things. I know it's hard sometimes for people to talk about their failures, but
well, that's where you're going to come on next episode. So hopefully with these Voices of Resilience, we'll get more into detail with Adrian Dotson. But before then, please reach out to him on his website. And for everything else, as you said, Adrian, what was that project, the Sovereign Strategies AI? When do you think that will be launching?
Probably tomorrow. So
right.
Today is October 4th. So by the time you probably upload this, it'll be up and going, because
all right.
yeah, I've been working on it. So
All right. Well, everybody out there, thank you for listening and tuning in to RezToCEO. And for everybody out there that wants to be a part of the podcast, please reach out to me on RezToCEO.com and also on Adrian's platforms, everything going on, what he's trying to pay for the next 7 generations. Thank you, Adrian, for being here.
Yep, you're welcome, man. Talk to you later.